Here is our first artwork for today. Notice our period style is high imperial. And the artwork we're looking at, well, this is a computer graphic reconstruction of it. It's the Forum of Trajan. The lead designer or architect of the project was Apollodorus of Damascus, and it is still located in Rome, Italy. Now, I've given you the vocabulary term forum here because it's important to understand what this is and why we call it a forum. So a forum is a complex of structures in a sacred heart of a Roman city with courts, a basilica, a temple, and a market. And so here we are specifically looking at the Forum of Trajan. So you get it? There are many forums. A forum is simply a complex of structures in a sacred heart of any Roman city, and they serve many functions with courtyards, a main covered area called a basilica. They often will have temples attached to them and places where open markets are or stalls are located as well. So this one is a forum that was built under the reign of Trajan, or I should say during the reign of Trajan. And it was funded by his overtaking of Dacia. So the amount of money, resources, and slave labor from taking of Dacia paid for the Forum of Trajan and is celebrated within this complex. Now, we're going to come and look at this in more detail, but I want you to understand how it would have been in the larger realm of the city of Rome. So here we are looking at a map of, we could think of this like the downtown area of Rome, and there are major roads, and you can see here there are other forums and other buildings, other structures. Just like any downtown, these buildings all serve different and varied purposes. The Vestal Virgins live right here, and then across the way we see the Basilica Julia. Now you might be thinking, Ms. Cortez, what's a basilica? I'll explain that. But a basilica is a rectangular enclosed space, or I should say covered space. So it's just a big building. So when we look at Basilica Julia, we see a big building. And here, a Forum of Caesar, named after Julius Caesar. And then there's a Forum of Augustus, right next to Caesar. And then right here, you see that, the Forum of Nerva. Nerva was the first of our 5 good emperors. And so building off of and connecting to the Forum of Caesar, the Forum of Augustus, and the Forum of Nerva, we have the Forum of Trajan. Now, you would have entered into the Forum of Trajan via a series of covered walkways. These dots here are columns that would have held covered passages. And then to enter into the Forum of Trajan, well, first of all, just like any other place, it is your access to the city is delineated by your status in Rome. So not just anybody can come into the Forum of Trajan and just hang out. The Forum of Trajan specifically housed a area of notaries, legal documents could be signed in the Forum of Trajan. So you would walk into the Forum of Trajan, there would be people milling around doing their business. This might be a place where if you're a businessman, you wanted to write up a contract, you tell your business partner, meet me at the Forum of Trajan, and then you'd go into the Basilica Oppia. Go look at it closely, but Oppia is named after Trajan's family, Oppius. And within this space, you might work out the negotiations of the contract and then have it notarized here at the spot. So that's the kind of social context of how these forums would be used. Got it? Let's look again closer at the Forum of Trajan. The Forum of Trajan was designed by one of his lead military chiefs. His name was Apollodorus of Damascus. I love that name. He's named after Apollo, right? Apollodoros. And then his last name, Damascus, he's literally from the city of Damascus. So we have Apollodoros of Damascus, who under the general Trajan served as a key military strategist. And here, under the rule of Emperor Trajan, helped to design and construct this very complicated network of a forum. And it was paid for by Trajan and Apollodorus's successful campaign into Dacia. So a typical forum, and like what we see here, would have a large courtyard, and that courtyard would be open to the air, so no roof. In the center, there would often be a statue of the honored emperor. So here in the Forum of Trajan, it was a statue of Trajan. It was an equestrian statue. Equestrian is a fancy word for horseback or on horse. So it was Trajan on horse, and it was this beautiful statue in the middle of this courtyard that was paid for by his campaign into Dacia. On either side were covered walkways that led up to the Basilica Oppia, which will be our next artwork. The Basilica Oppia was a covered or roofed space, and then if you passed through the basilica, on either side there were two libraries. Now, okay, you know I love books, right? Duh. And the Basilica Oppia, or I should say the Forum of Trajan, had two libraries behind this basilica. One housed books written in Greek, and one housed books written in Latin, the Roman language, Latin. These two were symbolic of the empire because most nobility, most people of high rank and status were bilingual, and they would speak both Latin and Greek. So we have a Greek library and a Latin library. And then behind the library was a temple dedicated to the divine Trajan. You see that? Because after Trajan died, because he was such a good emperor, remember what we do? We make them into gods. And so he was interned here, or buried. His ashes were kept here. And this site became a temple for dedications to Trajan. Specifically, his body or his ashes were interned under this massive monument called the Column of Trajan. And we're going to look at that as its own separate artwork as well. So the Column of Trajan is this tall structure, and beneath it were the ashes of Trajan. Behind the column was the temple dedicated to the divine Trajan. We've seen emperors being called divine before. Augustus, the divine one. We saw that in the Arch of Titus with his riding on the back of the wings of Jupiter, right? And there was in the inscription calling him the divine Titus and the divine Vespasian. So here again, we're seeing good emperors. We think that they become gods and they watch over us, and happy gods, happy people. On the side of the forum, we're looking at it here. Let me just try to draw it out. Let's see. Bear with me one moment. The Forum of Trajan abuts a mountain, or a large hill, I should say. So this is flat area, relatively flat area, and then it nestles right up against a hill. And on this hillside, Apollodoros of Damascus built the markets of Trajan. I laugh because it's the markets of Trajan, but think of it like a mall, a shopping center. And it was built or funded by Trajan and designed by Apollodoros. I'm going to put the markets of Trajan as a bonus episode or bonus video in this week's lecture. So let's zoom out here, and here's another computer rendering of the Forum of Trajan. Let me just Let's get the right ratio. Wow. Okay, so now we're standing in the middle of the courtyard. On either side, you see those rows of columns. Oftentimes, the interior courtyards would have these large planter boxes with these shrubs or trees or plants or flowers pulled from all over the empire. The statue of Trajan would have been facing, or would have been placed in the center of the courtyard. Now, it was made of bronze, and so no longer exists, because remember what we talked about with the classical Greek world? They loved making these large these large bronze pieces, but they can easily be hacked, melted, and made into something else. And that's what most likely happened to the equestrian statue of Trajan. But we know it was there based on how people described and talked about the forum. So lining the sides of the courtyard were these statues, these carved figures. You see them here? This is a detail of one of them. These carved figures. Now, if we were alive at this time, looking up in the middle of the Forum of Trajan, we would recognize what these figures are supposed to represent. They have long capes and toga, or short togas, long capes, and they have these really bushy, bristly beards. These we would recognize as the Dacians, the people that Trajan had conquered. In fact, some of them were described as having their arms bound, their hands bound. They were captive. They were prisoners of war, and they lined the courtyard. So again, think of that symbolism of being a Roman citizen here in this courtyard, paid for by the great Emperor Trajan, and then seeing those who are submitting to you, the Dacians, captive, and then almost like supplicating or giving themselves for the greatness of Rome. Powerful, right? Our next artwork, or the one that we're going to focus in on specifically in our next video, is the Basilica Oppia.